Hey everybody, how you doing? A man I supported to be San Francisco's next district attorney, then became San Francisco's next district attorney, suffered a bruising, nasty, pandemic-generated recall battle today when Chesa just got trounced. There's no other way to put it. Boudin got trounced. 60% of the over 116,000 ballots cast in San Francisco, which if you consider the population's about, what, 800,000, that's not bad for a midterm election. At any rate, they turned out, and they turned him out. That's right. 46%, just north of 46% of the voters voted to keep him in. Way not enough to stave off the many, many thousands of people who turned out to turn him out and away from office. And you would say, why? Well, the pandemic. The pandemic and our overall response to it, closure of businesses, which means loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of adequate government assistance to keep businesses open during the pandemic, led to an enormous, gigantic jump in crime after a quiet period. Remember, initially when everyone was staying at home, okay, crime was down, car use was down, but then after about 3 months of bliss, I would say, the crime wave started to kick up in many cities around the United States, and San Francisco was way not the exception. And people who had never faced the kind of Oakland-style robbery attacks, let's put it bluntly, that they heard about, and were suddenly experiencing them in San Francisco, and they watched in horror as perpetrators of crimes they thought were going to be convicted and jailed, in a number of cases, weren't. Meanwhile, it was getting so bad, the robberies in San Francisco, it has been so bad, the robberies in San Francisco, that a number of people have taken to carrying pepper spray wherever they go. It had become that bad. So someone had to pay the price. Now, do I believe personally that Chesa should have paid the price in this way? No, I don't. I have said once, I've said again, and I'll say many, many times, the reason for the higher crimes is simply that the money has been wrung out of our collective economy in the United States. You have people who need money and food to survive. And this worldwide pandemic has quite literally, in many parts of the United States, set people against each other in a search for food, clothing, and shelter. And San Francisco is one of those places where it's true because it's so expensive. It's not enough that 20,000 people left San Francisco and came over to Oakland. Overall, San Francisco lost roughly 88,000 people to the pandemic, seeking a better life, leaving California. And if they weren't leaving California and coming over to Oakland, they were going to other places in California where the cost of living was lower and the crime rate was lower. And no, I'm not saying that Oakland necessarily provided refuge for them, but in a number of places, you can find better deals to live at a reasonable cost than in San Francisco. Of course, that's changing in Oakland slowly, but we're trying to stave off the the takeover, as I would say, of ultra high cost of living. Not that we've done a great job of that. Just saying, okay? Just saying. But I digress. All right? But I digress. So my point is simply that Chesa really tried before the pandemic to have a safer, saner, more just San Francisco district attorney's office. That's what he tried to do. And I thought that was laudable. Okay? I really did. He just got hit by the pandemic, folks. That's really what happened. He just got hit. He just purely got hit by the pandemic. And there's no other way to look at it than that. He just plainly got hit by the pandemic. I would say that if we want to now look at the future of San Francisco, the question is who can best serve the role that Chesa Boudin at one point, before the election, before the pandemic, I should say, was poised to perform with aplomb before the pandemic. Now it's an entirely different situation. I don't think that a lock-em-up person is going to do the trick, because again, these problems are not necessarily born of Chesa. They're born of the very collapse in the basic socioeconomy in San Francisco, in Oakland, and in a number of major cities around the country. And at this point, we've had a dramatic drop in government assistance to help cities and people recover from the pandemic. And that is showing up in the drop in the rate of growth of gross domestic product in the United States. If you take a look at where GDP has grown over the past 2 years, those rises in gross domestic product have matched when we put in government subsidies to help people recover from and sustain impacts of the pandemic. Take those away, we get what we get. We start off the year with a drop in the gross domestic product. My prediction, we're going to end the year with a drop in gross domestic product. Okay? That's what we're going to do. I don't want that to happen, but that's where we are, because we've stopped doing economic planning. We can. And now we say, well, worldwide inflation, there's nothing we can do. There is something we can do. We can enact price controls on key goods, where those businesses may suffer from a standpoint of net operating income. We can target our subsidies to help them weather the storm. We can design our interest rates in such a way as to absorb the spending shock over long periods of time. We did that in World War II. The blueprint to handle this problem is before us. We simply have to want to use it. Now, regarding San Francisco does have an instrument it can use to quickly recover from the pandemic on its own. It comes in the form of a bill signed into law by California Governor Gavin Newsom last June, called AB 464, Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District Revenues, which can be used specifically to help business recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. That is what AB 464 allows. Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Districts for COVID-19 relief. And if you're wondering, can existing enhanced infrastructure financing districts also use that same tax increment revenue for they're generating for now COVID-19 relief? And the answer is yes. Yes. And if you think about what I'm saying, that COVID-19 relief can be designed by the city in any number of ways. It's a very flexible program. Let's talk about Chesa. For those people who might think that it was a Republican-led effort that got Chesa out, it wasn't. It was actually a Democrat-led effort. I've gotten their press releases, one after the other, published a couple though. They gathered over 80,000 signatures. You hear me? They gathered over 80,000 signatures to get Chesa out of there. They were serious. Okay? They were serious. Chesa tried the game of saying, well, you know, they're Republican-led. If I were Chesa and I were in his position, what I would have done is said, you know what? I'm going to work with the city of San Francisco to roll out a plan that centers around the use of AB 464 to get specific funding and recovery to those areas of San Francisco businesses that need them the most. And in areas where, hey, on top of needing them the most, they're quite likely to vote for me if I help them. Like the Marina District, you know, Cal Howell down there, or Union Square area, or the Financial District. You get the idea. He should have been a little more Machiavellian, but I don't think Chesa wanted to read the room. I think he could read the room, but I don't think he wanted to. He actually didn't think what happened tonight was going to happen. I really believe that. I think he was just completely beside himself with the idea that he wasn't doing a good job. It wasn't about him. It was about a force much larger than him. And that's the pandemic. And so when you have an unusual situation like that, you have to take an unusual approach to deal with it. He didn't do that. But now the question is, what will his predecessor do? And my prediction is this: whoever his predecessor is will run the danger of the same fate, because they are not the problem. The economic structure of San Francisco is. All right? They are not the problem. The economic structure of San Francisco and the inner Bay Area are the problem. You would say, what's the inner Bay Area, Zenny? San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Bridge, Berkeley over here, Emeryville, Albany, Marin, Sausalito over there, down around the airport. I call that the inner Bay Area. Boom. There. So let's see how this plays out. And my channel is back. Yeah. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com.